What is going on, YouTube? I am Mark. You're watching Trading with a Dummy. Today is my birthday, and I have a special guest that's coming on who's going to sit down and talk to me. Obviously, you guys probably know him. He used to be a VC. He is an option trader. He is one half of the Come Up series. You guys heard me mention the Come Up series several times throughout my videos. He is the one that essentially introduced options trading to me. So, ladies and gentlemen, give a round of applause for M&M, Mark Monroe. What's going on?
What's up? What's up? What's up? You don't see me in my typical t-shirt form, but I have to send you a special happy birthday. I was gonna wear a cardigan, but my wife was like, no cardigans.
Don't do it. Oh,
No
I
cardigans.
got you. I usually always wear my cardigans, but it is what it is. So I'm gonna start off asking tough questions. What took you so long to come on my show?
Oh, seriously? Sometimes I always say, it's good to have an invite, never just show up uninvited.
Dude, I invited you like 3 times last year. It got to a point where people were like, I did. He's lying. He's like, I got proof. I'm gonna put it.
I'm gonna call fake news here. Like, honestly.
You are fake news.
It is. All right. So
I feel honored.
Dude, I'm honored that you came on. And obviously we're gonna dive a little bit deeper beyond just stocks. As you know, my show is about you and everyone. I mean, most of the podcasts that you show up on mostly speak about options trading, the market, and etc. I have heard you talk about your past a little bit, but I do the Joe Rogan style stuff. I wing it. We're going to talk about your personal life a little bit, get a little bit deeper behind. We're going to pull a curtain behind and see who Mark Monroe is. So first of all, where are you from, Mark?
I am originally from St. Catherine, Jamaica, but pretty much Seattle, Washington. No accent, so we're just going to claim Seattle.
So you were born in Jamaica?
Yes, sir.
Oh, see, I think that's breaking news. I don't think you've ever told anyone that, have you? If not, it's kind of...
You know where you're from?
Yeah. So I hail from originally Jamaica.
I think I've said it pretty much in short passing. I think I did it on the Jollof show.
Okay.
But outside of that, nah. I mean, nobody really asked me, about my birth or anything like that. So
you were raised. So I mean, how long did you live in Jamaica before you moved to the States?
It's just like 3 years. So it doesn't really count.
So technically, you can't be like, I'm Jamaican. No, I got you. That's what a lot of people always tell me.
It doesn't really count.
Yeah, because I'm German. Everyone's always like, oh, you were born in Germany. It's like, no, technically, I was born in Washington State, by the ways, but I only lived there for like 3 months, and then
that's like Jordan being born in Brooklyn and then ultimately from North Carolina.
That's right. That is right.
Yeah. So do you have any siblings, or you're only child?
No, I am the youngest of 3, and so my oldest brother is Diamond. My middle-aged brother, who's older than me, is Dante, and then there's me.
And are they all also in the financial space, literacy space, Wall Street, anything when it comes to finances?
My brother started trading last year, Dante, and my oldest brother Diamond has yet to come into the financial space. It's going to take some time.
That's a very unique name. Why?
Name him so.
I know, but I know you probably asked his parents.
It's funny because his father's name is Diamond as well, so he's junior.
Okay, all right. So yeah, different parents?
We all have different fathers.
Oh, okay. All right. And then did you move to Seattle with your mom or your dad? Okay.
Mom.
And then you just basically raised there from, I guess, young age of 3.
Pretty much young age. And then became a part of the foster care system at the age of 4 or 5. And then came out of the foster care system. Well, never really came out of the foster care system, but more so my grandmother became our legal guardian pretty much at the age of like 6, 7. Mm-hmm. And then I just stayed with her ever since, until I turned 18.
So that must have been rough going through the whole foster care system, right?
Yeah. It was something. Just kind of like getting used to like trying to like find home, so to speak, and nothing ever really kind of like quite felt like home because like you keep going to all these different houses and it kind of like just feels like an elongated sleepover. And then the other part is the fact that my brother and I were never really quite the fit for those homes. So it's just like, oh, well, one of the things about that you'll notice about all, former foster kids, we pack very fast.
Mm-hmm.
We know how to pack our clothes very fast. So I guess I kind of developed that skill. But outside of that, it was tough. And it wasn't until the part where the state was going to probably separate my brother and I, Dante and I,
mm-hmm.
Because my oldest brother, his father took him, and it's like, I'll just raise my son.
Okay.
And so it wasn't until like that's where my grandparents were like, okay, we'll step in and we'll take him in.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't mind me asking, what ended up causing you guys to get into the foster care system?
My mother went to prison. And from there it was just like, okay, well, we were going to live with my aunt, but my aunt was also a Marine, so that wasn't going to be the most
conducive
amicable situation. Yeah. So therein, it was just like, okay, well, here we are.
So how many foster homes did you and your brother go to until
your
grandparents?
So my grandmother said at one point in time they moved us through like 12 homes in 1 week.
Wow.
So based upon that math, I went through a lot of homes.
Yeah, went through a lot of homes. So I'm not familiar with how they do the whole foster care system out here in the United States, but that seems like an excessive amount. Is it like the foster parents didn't want you guys, or is it a type of situation where it's like
it was a mixture of like the foster, like as soon as we showed up on the doorstep, it was like, nope, we don't want them. It could have been that situation alongside with, it wasn't conducive for us. And, my brother and I, we had to get out. One of the ones that sticks out vividly in my mind was we were staying with a family in Marysville, and I remember being disciplined once, and literally my discipline was I had to sleep in the barn. So yeah, when I told my grandmother that story, she was like, yeah, it's time. So they started the process of like, she went and, told my grandfather. My grandfather was like, off jump, go get those boys. And then at that point, it was just like, all right, well, it's either you're going to split us up or
you go
we come
family
as a package. Yeah.
So you never actually had any good relationships with any of the foster parents that took you or anything like that?
No. And it's very interesting because a lot of this information came forth full circle for me when it was time for me to go to college, because when going to college, they require a lot of documentation. And I realized, I don't have all this documentation. What am I supposed to do? I remember having like a complete manila folder of a ton of stuff that needed to be notarized, and going through the county, the state, and folks that I knew that worked in the legal system to literally get me like at least, there. So that way I was, pretty much qualified to go to college. So that was crazy, because I found out that the way that my grandparents had actually received my brother and I technically wasn't fully legal. So again, either way, it's like, it's a blessing. But yeah, that was like my journey, and I didn't even know this stuff until like very later on.
You went to college. Yeah, that's pretty insane. So I'm assuming it was just kind of one of those situations where your grandparents showed up, they're like, yo, you need to come with us now. And the foster parents were like, fine, as long as we get the check.
No. So here's how we actually showed up. We showed up to my grandparents' house on Halloween night. And it was like, the person that was supposed to be like, our handler or whatever they call them, our caseworker, they take some of the kids out trick-or-treating. We ended up at trick-or-treating at my grandparents' house, and it was like, oh, it's cool. And next thing you know, it's like, this is a drop-off situation. And it's just like, things are said very quickly, and then the caseworker is gone. I'm like, hey, I'm cool, because it's like, yo, my grandfather, my grandmother, and honestly, tons of cake and ice cream, because it was a celebration. So
wow.
Yeah.
No, Did that cause like any sort of behavioral issues for either you or your brother at all?
God, yes. God, yes. For me, given that I didn't have that time with my mom, it was like I was like really, really, one of the documentations that was said when I later looked at some of the files, they said that I was like really very much so a needy kid.
Mhm.
So it was like I was always clingy to like, try to like develop some type of rapport, with a mother figure or a father figure. My brother, he was just always angry. So
Yeah.
he was just like, nah, you're not going to tell me that any of these folks are ever going to be my parents. So he was like the destructive one. I was more so the quiet one, recluse. If I realized that it's like, okay, hey, there's no real connection here, I would just go recluse myself.
And obviously that changed once your grandparents took you guys.
Yeah, I mean, it changed. And believe it or not, though that I very much so have a strong love for both of my grandparents. Of course, my grandfather, like, of course, is like my heart.
Mm-hmm.
But it's crazy because when I first met my grandfather and also how tall he is, he and I didn't start off on the right foot. we didn't start off on the right foot because he's a very stoic, kind of quiet, very observant kind of guy. With a very like when you look at him, like everybody who always looks at my grandfather, they always feel intimidated.
What's up, Red? Thanks for the bite. What you got on my 40, homie?
But then it was just like, from that point on, it was just like, okay, there was moments in which that we got to that point of I was able to come out of my shell. And it was kind of weird because as I was coming out of my shell, his was kind of like softening to like, realize that, okay, hey, this is my grandson. He needs all the help that he needs. Story about my grandparents is that they met going through recovery. So
like drugs or alcohol?
Alcohol. My grandparents met through AA. And so like they were like their lives were just getting, like they had just like reached that solid footing and now they're just like living. And then now all of a sudden we got two new people in our house.
And now you gotta raise these two kids. And
you gotta raise these two kids.
Ooh, that had to be rough. That had to be rough.
This is the worst.
Was there ever the concern that, hey, mom's gonna come and pick us up again, or was it?
At one point in time, yes, early on, but my mom wasn't really around in my life that much. Like I remember traveling to go see her in prison, and it was just like, oh, hi, mom. And it was like, we didn't really have that kind of like relationship with each other, like she had with my oldest brother Diamond and Dante. So I kind of like miss some of those parts in that relationship. And then as we stayed with my grandparents, my grandparents was just like, okay, hey, they're here, let them grow up. If the time is that you can actually be their mom, then, if that's what they want to do, then boom. But by the time when she got out, like by that time, it's like, I'm a teenager now. Like I'm a young teenager, like 12, 13. And it's like, by that time, it's just like, I like where I'm at. And she never asked us to come live with her, but it was just like the small part of the conversation came about. And we never really had like those good conversations between the two of us. So it just didn't take.
How were you in school during this entire time? Were you pretty?
I was a smart ass in school. Like honestly, like very bright, very, very bright. When school got boring for me, of course I became a little bit more mischievous. But outside of that, it's like, for me, I've always loved school. Like I always loved learning. I always loved learning something that I didn't know because I had the privilege of having my grandfather who always, like, he knows that I love challenges. I love to be challenged. And so that kind of helped. But then when I started realizing that I wasn't getting that same type of challenge at school, I had to like literally create a game to like literally create my own challenges within school. And then when that got boring, then okay, well, we're in trouble here. So I ended up getting in trouble a lot, as you could probably see.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then my grandmother, she pulled me, like, I think one of the things that a lot of folks don't know about my story, which I guess I can share with you, is my grandmother made one of the wisest decisions, and that ultimately helped me, though that I was super pissed. My grandmother actually held me back a year. And I look back at it and say, you know, honestly, had my grandmother not did that, that wouldn't have shown me exactly really how serious life is, how serious my education is. And then 3, the fact that, you know, honestly, if I want to make it someplace, then, you know, I got to really start, like, you know, applying myself. And I think that alongside with other mentors that came in my life around that time, you know, my 7th grade year was probably my most like pivotal year in my education.
So it was 7th grade that she held you back.
Yep.
That I can imagine was also somewhat tough on the social aspect of things, because your friends moved on, and I'm sure they kind of make fun of you at one point.
No.
No.
I mean, honestly, it's like, because by that time I had moved to it, like, she also, like, my grandmother was like, yo, you are getting a complete reset.
Oh, okay.
So essentially, like, yo, all of this is out. Like, and little do people know, like, my grandmother started off as a teacher. So she was a teacher, then went to go work for Washington Mutual, and, you know, literally her career went on and, you know, went and blossomed. But yeah, so she just took me back to the fundamentals and said, okay, hey, but this is where we restart, and this is where we learn, and this is what the game plan is.
Yeah.
So
man,
yeah,
that'd be tough.
That was tough. That was a tough summer. It was a very, very tough summer.
But you learned your lesson. That's the thing, right? That's the takeaway. You end up learning your lesson. And obviously,
very much so.
Yeah, you move differently moving forward. What did your granddad do during this time? So you're saying that your grandma was working at Washington Mutual. What did your granddad do?
My grandfather was an engineer at Boeing.
Okay.
He was one of the lead engineers at Boeing, where a lot of the, you know, airlines that you fly on, you know, when you look out the window, if you ever have a window seat where you can see the wing, then that's a lot of the things that my grandfather prides himself on as it pertains to being a part of the design process for the wing.
That's awesome. Were they huge on talking to you about finances too growing up, you and your brother?
Well, I mean, you know, finances were always in the house. Like, you know, whether it was, you know, the stuff that my grandmother, you know, talked about through her conversations with either colleagues, or, you know, funny fact, when we lived on the south side of Seattle, her job was, like, her branch at the time was literally like, okay, so if you imagine our house is here, there's this large park called Othello Park. And then, like, maybe like 2.5 blocks, there's her job. So, like, she was never that far away from home. So sometimes I would just come and, you know, after school, come, like, just sit there at the bank and, you know, watch people, you know, watch my grandmother. And that's where I learned about, like, you know, bootleg PlayStation video games, because one of the employees that worked underneath her was just like, you know, he showed me the process. But yeah, I mean, that's really where I had where at the age of 9, I'm learning about stocks and stock markets and everything else. By the time when I'm, like, going to my grandmother's, you know, job and sitting there and watching her and watching people, you know, now I'm getting an idea of, like, you know, how, like, the financial landscape is as it pertains to just everyday individuals. And, you know, I would make up stories when I would see a new person walk into the branch when they're doing a deposit or withdrawal. And I would just, like, create a story in my mind. Of why is it that they need to pull cash, or why is it that they're depositing cash, and probably doing a guesstimate of, like, how much cash that they have in their bank. But it was like you kind of got to start to see things, especially when you sit there and listen to folks applying for home loans and everything else. You know, I got to see that. And, you know, for there it showed me a totally different side of the financial landscape of things, that I think that I would have probably missed. Why is it that I love economics so much? Because of the fact that I got to see economics at play, just going to see my grandmother work.
Okay. Now you said that at the age of 9, you started being interested in stocks. Now I know you said
No. Not interested in stocks. I was forced. I mean, I was encouraged to like stocks. I was encouraged. My encouragement was due to the donuts that my grandfather would go get.
Yes, please tell that story just in case people haven't heard that story. I know you talked about it on another podcast before. So
yeah. So pretty much my grandfather had an investment club of a group of, Black men that would sit in a room on Saturday mornings early, and they would literally talk the stock market, learn the stock market from individuals that worked at Wall Street firms, and just bring in knowledge and sit down and discuss. Like, just imagine having a person who's an analyst literally giving you an analyst breakdown in the room. And then on top of that, for me, it's like, I just, the aroma of those donuts were amazing. And I always realized that I always had when the donuts got to my brother and I, it was like there was a bunch of donuts missing. So I was just like, my curiosity and finding out that my favorite flavors were not there. I wanted to know, why is it that my donuts were not there? So I would wake up early in the morning just to see, what my grandfather would do. And I noticed that he'd go directly downstairs. He'd come in with the coffee from the store and these boxes of donuts. And I'm like, he leaves none of this. Like, he doesn't even set any of this aside, knowing that he knows what my favorite flavor donut is. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to sneak in somehow, some way. Bad idea. But I'm going to sneak in somehow, some way when they go on breaks, because sometimes his friends would take smoke breaks. And I would grab my donut and then run back upstairs and sit in my bedroom and eat the donut and just chill. Made the mistake of I got up early, but I didn't realize how early it really was. And I hid in a room that was directly, on the other side of a drywall to his office and, living room downstairs. And I fell asleep like this. Ironing board tips over, iron puts a hole into the drywall, and there's this loud thud. Of course I'm busted. I get my ass whooped, of course. And he was asking me, why did I do it? And I told him my reasoning for it. And he was and I think something in my grandfather clicked in saying, hey, the amount of thought process that my grandson put into all of this just to get a donut, let me bring him downstairs and sit in. And, that's ultimately how I got into the room.
Now, I gotta ask, as a kid at that age, obviously I know donuts is what you wanted. Ultimately, that's the reason why you sat there. Yep. When did you actually started being interested in it? Because I'm trying to get my son in it. I'm sure there's a lot of listeners who are trying to get their kids into learning about stocks and stuff as well. Yep. And it's kind of hard. So when did it start clicking for you?
It started clicking for me once when, I started getting challenged. Tell me that I can't do something. Tell me that I will never understand something. It's game on. Tell me that essentially that, my generation is lost. Game on. And it just literally came to the part where I think the greatest challenge for me was when my grandfather said, and he knew what he was doing. But he said, my grandson is, I don't think that he's smart enough to understand this.
You are disgusting. You'll never find love.
I was like, what? And I was like, okay. And, mind you, I was picking up stuff. And, pretty much long story short, I mean, pretty much it was like, I finally told him, I was like, the reason why, and I said, maybe our generation would probably understand this and maybe like this stuff if maybe you guys didn't sound so dry. And on top of that, you actually talked about things that we actually like. And so then he gave me the challenge to find a company that was actually on the stock market that actually I said that I deemed as a cool company. Now, mind you, I did not have the internet.
Oh yeah, this is before the internet, by the way. Yes.
I did not have. This is back in the time when you had to go to the newspaper and you had to read the business section, and the business section was like this large section, and it had a bunch of tickers and everything else, and you had to learn the tickers and everything else. So then when they started noticing how I broke down companies, and the analyst is like, yo, he's pretty good. Pretty much they started adjusting their speak because of the fact that essentially it's like, all right, well, he just like literally just broke down like what a company does, and fundamentally not really giving a lot of numbers, but just being able to give certain light and color to the conversation that they weren't giving. They were more so very, very on the PE ratios, income, balance sheets, and everything else that I wasn't even there yet. So it was more so in the sense of, can you tell the story, the narrative of the company?
So you gave them a different perspective as well.
Gave them a different perspective, and then ever since then, it was like, game on. When I realized, like, oh man, I just did something profound in this room, and all these black men are listening to me. Yo, donuts unlock, one, and then two, it's like, yo, gauntlet thrown, recognize greatness.
Wow, winning.
I'm assuming that your granddad, the people that were hanging out with him, were also people from work. So he got exposed. No, not at all.
No, so they were like, he tried to invite folks from his work, but that just that was a Fiesta Dale failure. And no, but he always had a strong group of colleagues in the room. I remember that was ultimately his investment room was also how I met Bobby Seale, one of the Black Panthers.
Yeah.
And other folks, like he had reverends in there. He had, activists in there. He had, other folks that represented other companies in there. And then of course he had Wall Street representatives there. So it was pretty much a mixed bag of just a group of Black men that come from different career spectrums, and pretty much like, hey, it's like we need to, across every single different industry spectrum, as across leadership, across these different areas of social, we need to be knowledgeable about what's happening in the market and make those investments.
Wow, so you were just around a bunch of really intelligent people growing up, people from...
And I didn't even know it at the time. I just thought that these were just some old ass farts that really just sat down and just... Yo, it wasn't until later, as I got older, that I realized, wow, I had the privilege of literally sitting in the room with just some pretty powerful people. And my grandfather never was the type of person to ever toot somebody's glorious accomplishments or anything like that. And when you stepped into the room, it was just pretty much these are just a bunch of adults, Black male adults, that essentially that you should always respect. That was it. That's all I knew.
Dude, that's dope. That's not how I grew up at all. And it's because your story is very different compared to everyone else that I spoke to, because it seemed to be within the Black culture or just minority culture in general that finances are not spoken about in the household at all. That's
it wasn't but it's crazy. It's crazy because to on that side of the spectrum, that's super cool. But then think about it like this. And there was this other side of the spectrum that the rest of my entire family, it kind of begs the question, why weren't other members of my family ever in the room? So it was and it dawned on me the fact that, they were also invited, but essentially they just never took advantage of the invite.
So would you say that it's kind of this discussion that I had with Charles, but I was saying that I hate when people say this is the information they kept from us, right? Which kind of shows me that, listening to your story, the information really wasn't kept. It's just that we weren't interested in it.
I mean, many times that's really where it comes down to. I mean, if you think about how many times did we know that all these companies were represented on the stock market, or that they were there, or that they were, these larger than life companies, and to know that essentially how do they make money and everything else. We've always known about bits and pieces of, what the stock market is. The thing is that we just never really, it's kind of I kind of look at it like this. Black finance never really evolved until somebody learned how to literally heat up the water, just like Black folks in swimming in the Olympics.
Mm-hmm. That's a
You
good
know,
analogy.
once when you realize that essentially that there is somebody there on that stage, then at that point, okay, hey, now things are like, yo, if this person's there and you know their story is pretty cool, then why can't I do it? And I think the same thing goes across the entire culture as we look across when we make inroads, when we break down barriers, and then ultimately we have a habit of kind of like once we break down the barrier, we have a tendency to sometimes take over the space.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was one of the things. It was just a matter of, did we really have, one, the energy, and then two, to know that we have enough energy, and then to do it, and then three, you know, the patience to be able to say, okay, hey, I'm going to actually take advantage of this opportunity. Think about it. It wasn't until, you know, the word spread around like forest fire that, you know, pretty much where you saw that the market had, you know, crashed in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's telling you like, yo, this is the moment that I could possibly get in because these prices are that low, when people really started to care.
Yeah.
And it was like, you know, think about it like this. Like, there are folks that worked at Fortune 500, at these same Fortune 500 companies, that never even chose to make the investments in their own 401k plans just to buy more stock and everything else, or to, you know, to like, it's that crazy. Like, you know, and it's not until you realize that, okay, hey, that there's a world beyond the world in which that you live every day, where you will find yourself to make a choice. Either one, I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity and explore it even deeper, or two, I feel like my life is way too busy and give it some form of an excuse to say that, okay, hey, I can't do it.
All right. So your grandfather is, I guess, his own version of his stock club, basically, back in the day. When did it stop, or did it continue all the way until you left the house?
No, it actually did stop. You know, life, you know, picks up. Things happen where like people get busy. And it was just like kind of like they kind of disbanded, you know, but they all like as it pertains to, they disbanded on Saturday mornings.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, they always kept in contact with one another. And I always, every now and then, saw like, you know, one or a few individuals that would come by and stop by and say hello to my grandfather. But, you know, mind you, my grandfather himself started picking up, even like started to take an even bigger challenge in his own career, which was, you know, especially as he was getting close towards, he realized that, okay, hey, I'm getting close to the sunset of my career, and it's a shame that I don't see that many Black folks here at Boeing. And so he took it upon himself, along with a few other folks there, to like, okay, hey, dedicate more time and energy to trying to help recruit more people of color to get into, one, engineering, and then two, to also go work at, you know, Boeing. And that started taking up a vast portion of his time. And I started realizing, like, you know, every mountain that my grandfather started to climb, I also started noticing, you know, the exhaustion. Like, it started off like, you know, and it's like, we see it, like we see those little small blips, you know, those moments where it's like, you know, it's like, you know, we call them senior moments. But then it's like, you know, the exhaustion starts to pick up, like, you know, grandfather being highly involved in the civil rights movement, and still like all throughout the time that I was in, you know, in their house, he never stopped. It just took different shapes, form, and fashion. And you just started noticing, like, you know, he's getting more and he's getting tired.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that, like, that plays, it starts to play a role.
Let's go to your high school. So once you graduate, at that point, because obviously you did graduate, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Hey, you never know. You never know. So, once you graduate, was your goal to get into the finance space, or like what was your dream? Like when you were growing up, what was your goal? What did you want to be?
Well, by the time I'm grad, so let me put it into perspective. So by the time I'm graduating from high school, I'm already working in the tech world. So I had the privilege of doing this program that this Titan at Microsoft, her name is Trish, and she started this program called TAF, T-A-F, and Technology Access Foundation. And she made it big. She was one of the, pioneers at Microsoft that just happened to be Black. And she wanted to create a program that ultimately prepared the next generation of kids of color in getting in the tech field. And my grandmother was like, that is perfect. That is right up Mark's alley. Mind you, this is after I went through that whole ordeal of taking apart my grandparents' computer multiple times to try to put it back together before they made it home from work. So they were like, yeah, this is perfect. Mark always like consults his grandfather on, technology and everything else. So, let's just put him here. So that way, essentially, he's got debate, chess club, and in sports. So just another thing. So that way he could stay away from us and not cause any trouble. Perfect. Started that 8th grade, went all the way up to, I think, my sophomore year in high school. And then from there, it was just like, okay, I had a part-time gig at a tech company. And then when it came time during the summer, time, I had a full-time internship. So it was pretty cool. From there, for me, it was like, I thought about getting into computer science and engineering. I really did. And after being at Microsoft and working there, and seeing exactly like how like people were treated, I said no. I actually thought about becoming a lawyer, because one of my jobs that I also had was working for a law firm. And I realized how much school that would take, and that was out. I didn't want to be a doctor, right? And I was like, engineers, I was like, I saw how the engineers, thought, especially since I live with one, and sometimes they can think a little different. So I was just like, I'm just going to do business. It was either going to be business or journalism, because I still love to write. So I was just like, okay, well, I'll just, pick one of those two. And then it came down to like, literally I flipped a coin and I was just like, you know what? Heads, it's business. Tails, it's journalism.
Fair enough. You first.
Started off with journalism as a communication major. And then I realized exactly how much they get paid.
It's not good.
And I was like, hell to the nah.
Yeah.
And no shade towards journalists, because you have to be very passionate in what you do. And I just don't think that I had that strong enough amount of passion to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just like, all right, business it is.
So once you graduated from there, where did you end up after?
Correction. Here's a spoiler. I never technically graduated from Tuskegee University.
Oh, y'all heard it. There you go. There it is.
I never walked the stage. I left before all of that, and pretty much there was an opportunity waiting for me, which happened to be the fashion industry, and I took it.
Oh, did you just say fashion industry?
Yes.
All right, no. This took a crazy turn, because you didn't. I was under the assumption that you actually graduated. Nope. So you got out and you left for a job.
I'm like Mark Zuckerberg and everybody else. I'm a college dropout.
Wow. But you got to explain this fashion industry. What was the job and why?
So it was an opportunity to be a model on a modeling contract, and it was going to allow me to travel and go see the world internationally. And when I saw the amount of money, when I was told the amount of money that I can make on such contract, that was it. That's all I needed to hear.
Wait. So you were a model?
For a very, very brief time.
you got to send me these pictures, right? I'm going to put them up.
I am not, trust me, the photos that I took, trust me, you do not want to see. So just for the record, I was in underwear, pretty much for the catalog model.
I'm a little more complex.
Cam, we need the tighter drawers.
Because it has been decided that Marky Mark will appear in Vanity Fair magazine.
And that is probably like the not so brightest point in my career.
Oh, wow. And you said it only lasted for like a short period of time?
Like about 6 months.
And then was it because you didn't get gigs afterwards, or you were just done with it? It wasn't the industry that you wanted to be part of?
It just wasn't the industry that I wanted to be a part of. When I saw the things that took place in that industry, I just said, and the things that I tried to to even assimilate that I would have never done, had I not been in that industry. Honestly, I just said that this is not for me. This is, and I imagine my grandfather just looking at me and just like, seriously? We invested all this time, energy, and money, all the activities and everything else for you to do this. So yeah, that was it. Like, honestly, that was like, nope. Like, I literally, didn't want any part to do with being a model after 6 months.
Was there
the money was good. The money was very good, but then I learned like there was a lot that goes beyond just like taking great photos or taking product photos and everything else. Like, for example, working for being a part of an agency, and though that they're always like pitching or trying to get you to do other stuff and sending you places, there's a lot of folks who go into debt, to their agency. And, once you get behind the 8 ball, it's like, it's hard to ever come out of it. And the fashion industry is like so fast where it's on to the next season and it's moved on. So for me, it was just like, yeah, this is not the place where it's like I could be using, the talents in which that the man up above has blessed me with. I need to look elsewhere.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a rough business. It's funny because you and I actually have a lot in common. I also modeled. In
Yeah,
Germany.
look at that, see?
And it's and I hated it. It's a very shallow business. It's a crazy business to be in. So once you went from being an underwear model, where did you?
This down.
I'm not. Yeah, this is.
I have just given you jokes for the entire 2022.
basically. What did you end up doing afterwards? Like, what brought you into the next venture?
As fate would have it, it brought me back to Seattle, where my mentor was starting an engineering firm, and he needed someone to help him, like, because he was buying out the West Coast division of an original firm called RCT Engineering, and he was creating his own firm called Urban Tech Systems. And he needed help on the technical side as well as on the business side, to really help start the business up and going, to get all of those things in order, along with working with the East Coast branch on the tech side to disconnect and then also to get things going. And it was kind of crazy because it was like around the same time of the financial crisis, where everything's kind of like going to crap. And so here he is in this, like, the way that they got there, like, I guess, so in doing the deal, they acquired their furniture in the office space because that they were there at that building. They got their space because of the .com bubble bust.
Mm.
And so pretty much they had all this furniture in the office space, and that's when the lease and everything else was cheap. And then when we walked in, a new financial crisis had hit, which was, pretty much, the housing market crisis. And it was pretty much, that was ultimately what brought me back. It was just like, hey, there was this opportunity. I'm thinking about doing this, will you help me get it up and going? And, he only had like literally, what was it? Like 9 days to make the transition and to start a new firm like that. And, my thing with challenges is, okay, well, let's go for it.
I've been hearing you say a lot, mentors. So you have had all these mentors in your life that kind of helped you get to the next level. So, yep. And obviously at this point, you're in your 20s?
Yes.
I'm correct? Okay. And so what type of advice would you give a 20-year-old like right now, on what they can do to level up. Because I know me, in my 20s, I pissed it away. I'm not gonna lie. I live in Vegas.
I did too a little bit, but
yeah, dude, gambling, strip clubs, drinking, partying all the time. It was literally, I wasted my 20s away. And I know now in this generation, especially with the pandemic and everything going on, a lot of 20-year-olds could potentially be lazy. All right.
Yeah.
And it doesn't sound like that was really in your genes. Like you weren't
no, I mean, I was always like the kind of like the hustle kid, like from very early. Like I had an illegal business in grass and landscaping. You know, my grandparents would pay me $20 every 2 weeks to do the lawn, or once a month, $20 a month. But then I started realizing that, I can make significantly more than that. But then at the same token, I hated having to do all the grass because, my grandparents were just brutal when it came to just doing yard work. But there was this kid down the street who didn't understand the value of money and everything else. He just wanted to buy candy and everything else. So he was willing to do the work if I contracted him to do it. So I would give him 20%, and then I would keep the other 80%. And then ultimately it was like, boom, I've got money. You got a little few dollars and everything else to fill your pockets. We're good. Got busted. But, it was always trying to find the next thing. I built computers as a business when I was 13. Didn't really quite work out because my brother didn't really help on a marketing basis, and I couldn't market as well as, that's actually how I met, do a lot of the things that I did in life, especially as an aspiring entrepreneur as a kid. That's ultimately how I met my mentors. I built pretty much as a computer builder. It's I built a lot of my mentors' machines, and then ultimately it blossomed into something else. Because it was how many Black, young males at that time was doing that. Develop writing code to develop websites for folks. And so for me, it was I guess, one of the things that really sticks out to me is there's a quote that says the wise man seeks the counsel of many, but whereas a fool only literally resides within their own thoughts. So for me, I looked at it in the sense of, I always wanted to aspire to be in the room or to meet and know people that were ultimately not only just smarter than me, but in places in which that, they have achieved an area in which that they had to work hard to get there. And I literally flocked to that. I literally flocked to the fact of other people that hustle. I remember one time I almost flocked to the wrong person who hustled. And that
it could have went a different way. It could
have went a very, very different way had my grandfather not said, look, this is not it. You're gonna live in my house. That's not gonna fly.
Yeah.
But outside of that, it was just the advice that I can give to 20-year-olds now is, one, seek discomfort. That's the first thing. Do things in which that, not in the sense that are stupid, but do things in which that ultimately challenge you to be better, a better version of yourself. That's going to be very uncomfortable because it's going to require you to grow. And two, it's okay to be around folks in which that know more things than you, that happen to be older than you because they've lived on this earth longer, they've survived it. So obviously they're going to know some things, maybe just a few things, and that ultimately that you can learn from. The greatest, my brother Diamond once said, he was yo, when you think about going to school, when the teacher says, I got mine, you got to get yours. And he would always say, well, that's the reason why I'm here. So that way I'm using you for everything that you got, so that way you can give it to me. So that's ultimately how I've always looked at it, in the sense of knowledge and wisdom, seek that, because, those are some powerful tools. The execution and everything else will, that will ultimately find its place, and it will ultimately fall into place when you're ready to do it. When you're ready to execute, you're going to execute. But I would say this: when the student is ready to learn, the teacher appears.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's when you find people around you when you're doing certain things that are ultimately you're trying to chase success and everything else. Success is contagious. So ultimately you'll find that, people will ultimately want to help feed into that success and ultimately try to help you be even better. You just got to be accepting and open.
And you were, and that's how you end up getting those opportunities. Like once
at first I wasn't, but I got there.
Yeah.
I got there.
So once you helped out your friend start this business, how long did you stay there?
That was pretty much the last company that I ever worked for.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
and
that was the last company that I ever worked for. That was I told myself, I was like, and I look to him like he's like my father. So Kaz Roberts, if you're watching this, he's literally like the father figure that I've always wanted. Like I have two, like many fathers, but really the two fathers that stick out is Louis St. Cyr and Kaz Roberts. And honestly, really the invaluable knowledge that they gave me was, the fact that he gave me my first ever real significant startup shot. And on top of that, I got to learn, how to be more so not only just a leader, but more so an executive. I had to learn and think like an executive. Mm-hmm. Going from Microsoft, which, you're being told to do X, Y, Z, to now you have to think about it because of the fact that you have to figure it out and ultimately do things on your own and be self-starting and also delegate, because of the fact that the survival of this firm, rests in your hands. And so I really appreciate the fact that he gave me that shot. And, the beautiful thing about it is he always made it comfortable for me that if I always had an idea that I wanted to go out there and chase, he never scrutinized it. He always left it open for me to do so.
When you started with him, though, you started obviously at the bottom, right? And then you worked yourself up, or you came as
because there was only two people.
There's only two y'all. Oh wow! So that was a huge opportunity, and also
that's what I said. That was the opportunity of a lifetime.
Wow!
It was tough. It was tough because I knew nothing about civil engineering. I knew nothing about like that entire landscape of, municipal work, federal work, private contracting, any of that. I knew nothing about that at all. And it's like he understood how I thought. He understood how I worked, and he literally said, I believe that you're great. We're gonna find out exactly how great you are because I'm gonna push you and test you. And he, like former military himself, he did it. Like it was just like, all right, boom. These are the things that we need to execute. These are the things that got to be resolved. These are our goals. How do we get there? What's the strategy? What's the standard operating procedure in order to execute and get these things done? And yeah, it's like pretty much I had to learn a whole new world, and I got thrown in the deep end.
Yo, he took a huge bet on you, man. A huge bet.
He did.
Yeah,
he did. Wow. And I almost quit. Like I almost quit like every week.
No, I could imagine. So that's basically how you got into the VC space.
So I got into the VC space long after, so I went from Urban Tech Systems to starting my own company and also sitting on a few other companies on their boards. And then company got acquired. And then now I'm like, okay, what now? And so I went back to doing work at the firm and trying to help the firm go and everything else. And then it's just like, I could be investing in other startups because, you read TechCrunch, GeekWire, mm-hmm. You read all these different platforms like, VentureBeat and all this other stuff. And you're like, all right, these are some solid ventures that I'm seeing that are coming out, and I've got some money now, how do I invest in it? And then that's when I started to think about like, okay, hey, what does it take to be a venture capitalist? How does one start? What are the requirements and everything else? And it was crazy because one of my advisors back to the company that I was the entrepreneur of, he was an angel investor. And then ultimately he was like, what is your thesis? He helped me critique the thesis. And then after he helped me critique the thesis, then ultimately he became one of the partners of the firm that I started.
So just to go back a little bit here, I've heard you say it before, but obviously you started learning about options trading in college, right?
Correct.
And during this entire time, you were still doing like the options trading and everything while you were working for the firm and everything else. And
The greatest mistake that I made, though, the greatest mistake that I made after I had all this capital, I didn't put all that capital to work. Like, you know, I like honestly, who knows where I would be had I did that. After acquisition, before VC, you know, put it in a few stocks and stuff like that, like, you know, but, you know, pretty much did still do some options trading, but it was very much so like, you know, I kept pretty much the same balance going, like maybe no higher than maybe $2-3 million out of the whole spectrum of capital. And I was just like, oh man, I did not execute until later on.
So we all know that you're rich, obviously, but you got your money from selling the business that you had started, right?
Correct.
And what was this business that you started?
So it was a recruitment platform that would ultimately validate the skills of candidates. So by the time when they validated the skills of the candidates, then ultimately it would automatically connect you to recruiters and jobs that they had already placed for looking for specific skills. So it's pretty much playing matchmaker based upon the candidate validating those skills. So that way it would cut a lot of the process out of the way for the recruitment.
So it's like ZipRecruiter.
Well, yeah, ZipRecruiter is like one of those pieces that you see today. Yes.
All right. And what made you decide to even try to get into a business like that? Did you see like some sort of gap that needed to be filled, or?
Well, it was the financial crisis. Like you always find that the economic situations, now that I've been able to like look at it now from where I am today, like it's always the situations, the economics, like, you know, playing fields of what we see today create opportunities that entrepreneurs spot and they go after. For me, I saw that during that time of the financial crisis. Think about how many folks were out there looking for jobs. And then think about how many new students that were coming out of college that were also trying to prove that they knew what they were doing and that they were qualified to execute those jobs. And then now you have those new students that are competing against those folks who have 3 to 5 years worth of experience. And it's like, okay, hey, well, can you give me 3 to 5 years worth of experience? And do you have that skill set? Are not only just in the sense of you knowledgeable just on a theoretical basis, but, you know, when we put you through that process of, you know, how do you think things through? How do you, you know, solve problems? You know, that's a whole different, you know, perspective. If you guys really think about it, for anybody who works out at Amazon, you know, I had the privilege of sitting in as an advisory at one point in time for what we now know as the Amazon bar raiser for what it is today.
That's dope.
And ultimately, you know, therein was essentially what we were trying to ultimately accomplish.
So once that business got acquired, that's where you basically got your wealth from.
Correct.
And then you weren't really having your money work for itself at that point. You were. But it sounds like,
I mean, it's like, yo, it's like nobody that I knew, like from that point in time, it was just like, yo, you know, now I know, like, honestly, I remember making this joke to myself. I was like, shit, now I know what lottery winners feel like.
They win, don't know what to do with the money, except
they win and they don't know what to do. But then I thought about like, yo, I did all this work and I, you know, went through all this process and all this time, energy. And then on top of that, the knowledge that my grandfather gave me, it was just like, and I just really felt like paralyzed. I legit felt paralyzed because I was like, okay, well, what do I do now?
Because that was your baby. That was your baby.
By this time, it's just like, okay, what's the roadmap? What's the blueprint now? Like, what do I do now? Like, there is no roadmap or no blueprint at this point in time. Like, there is none of that. Like, you're literally legit on your own, because everything in which that you've accomplished, like, you know, you've accomplished like that pivotal, like that Mount Olympus goal that everybody like hopes to achieve and strive for, that like you realize that when you look back, a lot of folks really didn't like come anywhere near close to that. But now it's like, you know, what do you do? Like, how do I move? How do I execute? Like, you know, what's my plan? What's my agenda? Like, what's the next thing? I had no plan.
So you kind of had like a loss of purpose there for a while.
I significantly had a loss of purpose, which ultimately led to me having a panic attack.
That's the crazy part is, obviously, did you get multiple offers for acquisition, or was it just like a one-time offer and you were like, "Yo, I'm take this"?
This is a very sour subject. This is a very sour subject because now, for folks that know, it was a Monster.com acquisition, which they later got acquired by Randstad. But had I held off for even just maybe a month or 2 months, LinkedIn would have come knocking on my door. And we already know how that story went, where LinkedIn ultimately got acquired by Microsoft. And that would have made the whole story like come back full circle because I started at Microsoft, then but I mean, honestly, it was like, I look at it like this, and Q always says it best: you are where you're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
So for the decision that I made at the time being, it was, who knows that, LinkedIn would have come knocking. I didn't know at the time. So I had to make the best decision of what we had. And ultimately, that was it.
Yeah, and obviously you didn't come from money. So this was like a huge opportunity. And it's like, do I pass this opportunity up and maybe not get acquired ever? And just
right. Like, there's that
bankrupt.
And it was funny because I remember doing some research and knowing that once you received your first significant acquisition offer, after that, it's like there's this period of time where it's a challenge. There's this period of time before you even have the next offer.
Yeah.
And it made sense because, at the time we had a partner called, they were called Smarter. I know it's a weird name, but they were the ones that really helped us work out a lot of the quizzes and exams for our candidates.
Mm-hmm.
Guess who acquired them? LinkedIn had acquired them.
LinkedIn too. Oh.
And we were already it was just Smarter was like, hey, we're thinking about doing this with our platform. And then, and then it went to Plural. Then they became it went from Smarter to then they became Pluralsight, and then Pluralsight got acquired by LinkedIn. And it was just then we received an acquisition offer, and it was just oh man.
Have you lost your mind? Because I'll help you find it.
I've never seen this type of figure before.
Yeah. And how many partners did you have during that time?
So there was 4 original founders, and then there was a ton of team members underneath. So we made sure that every member of the team had equity in the company.
So how does it work in a situation like that? Once you get acquired, is it just one day to the next? It's just all right, you're done. This is it. You hand everything over.
So there's this process that after due diligence phase and everything else, and signing of paperwork. Normally what they put in their paperwork is that the founders or the people of the team literally have to go over and literally you're literally letting the acquiring team understand and go further in depth in dissecting what is it that you built? That's what it ultimately came to. But then it was just so that we call that the golden handcuff phase, where it's you're there for 6 months to a year. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to be there for 6 months to a year. That just wasn't going to happen. But I said, I'll be there in a consulting, side for maybe 6 months. And it was kind of crazy because around the time that before we even received the offer, it was getting really challenging for us because the market itself for recruitment platforms started to significantly heat up. Mm-hmm. We're coming out of that recession. So ultimately you're seeing this swell of talent that's ultimately being gobbled up by major companies and everything else. And so, and even then it's the challenge as it pertains to will this be successful? So I've even had people that worked on the team. We started having folks quit to go work at larger companies, take different roles. And then it came down to our team significantly started to decrease from going from 20 people to down to 6 people. So and it was just really engineers, me and a bunch of engineers. And then the crazy part about it is the fact that, again, having to make that choice of, I've completely dwindled down as it pertains to my team. What's going to potentially happen next? we got to make a decision. And then so after the acquisition took place, and pretty much within the first like 10 days or something like that, get the notification that Randstad has now acquired Monster, some European company. And they gave me like the greatest gift of all. They said, look, we're just going to cut it, honor the deal as it pertains to what was happening or what was already set forth. And we're just going to say, okay, hey, if you want to like, we can find something else for you. But if not, it's like, like we can just, end the golden handcuffs and set you free. And I was just like, ha, shoot. Put 2 fingers in the air, split them and shake them. And that was it. Like that was literally it.
And so while you're sitting here and you try to figure out and find yourself, is that when you end up getting into trading?
No, so I was still trading. Like, I still had like long-term contracts and everything else going, at the time. But, I really started, getting back into it more so because of the fact that I didn't really have anything else on my plate.
Mm-hmm.
But I was dipping my toe back in because it was just like, I went from just doing long-term positions to like, having to get reacquainted with, I know the market as a long-term trader, but it's like, what has changed since, the last time that I used to be a swing or day trader.
Mm-hmm.
A lot has changed, and I knew about it, but it was just like, okay, hey, well, there's some things in which I just got to reacclimate myself with. And that was the process itself. Just getting reacclimated to a market but the beautiful thing about it is as I was getting reacclimated, it just literally felt like poetry in motion. It just felt like, just meeting your first love all over again.
Now, were you interested in trying to start another business at that time at all? Or were you just more interested in like, what, this was fun, I'm done? Because it sounds like the trading and the option stuff was there in your life, but you were more passionate about
I was more passionate about
entrepreneurship. Yeah,
correct. Yes, I was, but I didn't have an idea. And for me, it's like I think about things in the sense of I'm wired a little differently where it's just like make me mad. Like if something makes me mad, then I'm gonna figure out something in which that like literally can be built from that. When I found out that a lot of the folks that I felt like were even smarter than myself were just like sitting there struggling to find jobs, that pissed me off. Because I was like, yo, why is this person not working? Why does this person not have a job? How many other people are going through the same problem? What's the problem that's ultimately the blocker? That's literally how my mind starts to like break down like pretty quickly. Like, okay, do I have the capacity to build this? After that, it was just like, after I had gone through all of that, and mind you, my health, I'm now married. Now I'm freshly married at this point. My life is just like.
Wait, what about your health? You kind of don't skip over that.
Oh, well, in 2011, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's stage 2.
Mm-hmm.
And, going through that, like, going through, treatment and everything else, like, that weighed on me along with my team. And on top of that, it was stressful, which also I believe that stress ages you.
Mm-hmm.
And so like there was a lot of stressors that I didn't realize that were like literally that entrepreneurship had literally brought onto my life. And I just wasn't there yet. I just wasn't mentally ready for the next thing yet.
You wanted to chill. You wanted to take a breather.
It's not that I wanted to chill. It was just the thing is I just didn't have it. I just didn't have an answer. Like for once in my life, I didn't have an answer. I just didn't have an answer to what was next or what was the next mission. What was this? How do I, what's the next problem that I look to solve? I never really thought of myself as a serial entrepreneur where I just had a cookbook of ideas. And as soon as this idea is done, then I move on and build the next idea.
Mm-hmm.
I never really thought about it like that. And for me, I just said, I sat back and asked myself, well, what did I learn, just doing some evaluation of what is it that I went through in the process as an entrepreneur. And then that's when I realized damn, I remember going to like pitch like 37 different VCs and all of them telling me no, and they were giving me all bullshit reasons for why is it that they wouldn't invest in my startup. That's a problem. I wonder how many Black folks like me or people of color struggle to do that. And then I saw this thing where there was this video of where they have these Black accelerators and how they still were like trying to, you know, really make inroads within the startup community in Silicon Valley. And I was just like, man. And looking at the investors in Washington State at the time, they were completely risk averse, though that there's a ton of millionaires per capita here. But they all wanted to go into things like real estate, and there's only so much real estate that you can buy up. And so it was like, for me, it was just like, you know, something's got to be done. And I think one of the things that pissed me off was I reached out to one of the Black VCs that I had actually pitched to that kind of just like gave me the cold shoulder. And I told him later on, it's like, you know, hey, my company's acquired. And he's like, now all of a sudden you want to talk to me?
Yeah, because now you're somebody, obviously.
Right. And I was just like, At that point in time, I was like, you know what? We're going to just give you the Heisman and then ultimately like look to solve problems elsewhere. And I just said, you know what? You know, since the world didn't really care about me as an entrepreneur, then I don't want them to know about me being an investor into startups. I just rather just go silent and just go fly under the radar. And for quite a bit of time, that's exactly what I did. I just flew under the radar. When it came to even helping people understand the markets, you know, and teaching, like even people like Jolene, I flew under the radar.
Yeah. And that's, I would say, what led you to, I guess, taking that Dark Knight persona once you were ready?
Yeah, you know, really, it was just like, you know, hey, you know, I never really wanted, like, to me, it was never really about getting press or anything like that. It was always in the sense of, if I have the capacity to help, then I want to help. If I want to help solve a problem that I believe that I can make a major impact on, then I'm going to do it. If not, I'm not going to just do it just because somebody tells me that I have to do it or that some social construct says that this is what I'm supposed to do. And so when I started helping, you know, people that, you know, like us, you know, silently invest, well, then that's when the story started to become a little bit more like interesting, because then that's really where the genesis starts for everybody else, which is Jolene making the announcement on her social media that she brought in 967% return that year. And then boom, it's like everybody's just like, wait a minute, what? And then it's just like, well, hold up, like, yo, and then my messages are blown up and I'm like, now I just feel like, you know, I went from being, you know, the Dark Knight to really feeling like Iron Man in the situation where Tony Stark now has to admit to the world and tell him that, you know, hey, he's Iron Man.
Was Jolene like your, I guess, first mentee that you kind of took underneath you when you tried to teach? Okay, so you had a bunch before. She was just the first one that kind of publicly was like, "Hey, I made all this money."
There was always a rule. There was always a rule where it was just like, "Yo, here's how it worked." Pretty much, you know, I would help you get to a certain point, and to a point where it's kind of like guaranteed. And then pretty much I would say like, you know, hey, form of payback at the time was like 20% was my take back out of what you got, and instead of giving it to me, go put it towards a nonprofit organization. That was always the rule, or give it to someone in whom which there was the need. I just wanted to see the receipt, or just show me that this is how, like, this is where you're putting it. If you want to do it in an honorarium, then that's fine. Don't really care about that, but just show me that this is what you're doing just to pay it forward. And then when it came to like, you know, hey, well, I know this person, I would literally make other people qualify other people. So I had a process of how is it that I would like say, okay, hey, you want me to mentor this person. That means that you're vouching for this person. So that means that essentially that you've got to give them the same homework, take them through the same process that I took you through. And if they pass, like, and it was like you had to do it in 24 hours.
Okay.
And if you couldn't get it done in 24 hours, then that let me know that would let me know how serious you were.
You seem to be a person who is huge on helping people and paying it forward, because I mean, obviously you make money, and I know a lot of people think that once you make a lot of money, all your problems go away. But it sounds, obviously it doesn't. It just makes certain things easier.
Yes.
But what I noticed about you, and which really stood out, because again, I met you through EYL, obviously, because you used to show up in the chats as a Dark Knight. Yeah, Super Chat used to drop money. And I guess they knew who you were, but nobody else did.
Technically, they didn't know who I was when I was first throwing out the Super Chats.
Okay.
They didn't know.
Now, this was about that. Was that like a strategic thing that you decided to do? Was that the time when you were like, you know what? I think I want to kind of put myself out there a little bit to...
The whole point of me throwing stuff in the Super Chat was, it was like one of my mentees. This is how I discovered EYL. I discovered EYL through one of my mentees, in which that was like, you know, hey, this is where I'm learning information. And I started noticing, like, you know, hey, like when we're going through these sessions, I'm like, yo, like, come on, get with it. What's going on? And he was like, well, I haven't had the time. And I'm like, well, what are you doing? Well, I've been watching this. And I'm like, okay, well, we watched it together. And we were watching, and I was like, yo, there's some pretty good information here. And he was like, you know, he was like, well, why don't you do something to, like, you know, why don't you do this stuff more publicly and help people? And I was like, because that's not my style. That's not who I am. He was like, but just think about how many of the plays and everything else in which that you invest in and everything else, you know, how many people would have, you know, benefited from those plays? And I was like, I don't know. Let's see. So I just start dropping the plays in the Super Chat. Like, that's literally how it came about. Just dropping the plays in the Super Chat just to see, you know, hey, will this help people? Will this help them understand and everything else? I tried dropping it in the chat, and I was just like, I want it to stick. So just in case if somebody says, okay, hey, it got lost in sauce, because I saw that the chat goes pretty quick.
Yeah, it goes pretty quick. Yeah.
So I was like, all right, well, let me just drop it in Super Chat. So that way it's just there as a placeholder for folks just to see it. But then I had to get like a little bit creative, because I was like, wait a minute, hold up. I don't want this coming back to me. So let me go ahead and just switch it up as it pertains to like a moniker and everything else. So then that way it's like, it doesn't like trace itself back to me. And I mean, boom, it ended up tracing it back, because I remember dropping it in as Mark Monroe. And that was the biggest mistake that I made. And then that was ultimately how I got discovered.
No. You should have started. The Dark Knight thing was kind of cool, because I didn't honestly.
I should have thought about that first, and it just didn't click for me at first. I was like, oh man, I was like, I just realized, like, and he was like, and then my mentee was like, you know that they know your name now, right? And I was like, wait, how? I was like, wait, and he was like, go look, and I was like, oh.
Yeah, see, I didn't catch it. I just caught the Dark Knight part. I don't think I ever caught your name. It wasn't until you actually showed up on the show. But everyone was like, who's this Dark Knight guy? And I was like, oh, it's probably some rich white guy who's sitting in Silicon Valley somewhere. That's honestly what I thought. So when you showed up, I was very shocked. For one, I'm pretty sure you're younger than me. Are you under 39?
Yes, I am. Yeah,
so that pissed me off for one. But I'm not gonna lie. Okay, all y'all are younger than me. At one point, I was like, man, I really should have done things differently. But like you said, you're at a place for a reason.
But that just lets me know that there's still work to be done now.
Absolutely. But you stood out, and then no one really knew about options within that community, because I was one of the OG at that time. I started before they really blew up. I was part of the community. I was there, so it was pretty cool to see you show up and then teach everyone about options. And
I had to, like, because I was like, yo, like, I get it, like, you know, having stock in your portfolio is definitely something that you should do, hands down. But when I see the amount of money that can be made, especially if you put the knowledge and the time and kind of treat it in the same manner, and how you're willing to hold things for the long term with, like, you know, weathered expectations, you know, that fuels everything from there. And I was like, yo, I would be remiss not to share that with everybody, because there's, like, it would be like kind of like getting in on Silicon Valley when the water is freezing cold. It hadn't even warmed up yet.
Yeah.
And I was like, yo, I feel remiss if I did not share this with everybody and they did not have an opportunity to take part. I think that at that point in time, I was like, yo, I don't think that I would be able to live with myself knowing that there was an opportunity there, and that there was a ton of folks that could have capitalized and taken advantage of such an opportunity. And boom, it didn't happen.
Were you ready for the level of attention you were gonna get after that?
God no. Like it was like if you like one of the things that you guys don't know was the day that I was showing up on the show, I was like ridiculously nervous because now my life is gonna go out there publicly. And two, like before I actually showed up, before I came downstairs, I literally vomited upstairs. I literally vomited. I was like, yo, one is like my life is now, but like my life is about to be in spotlight. I don't know how big, I don't know how small, but just still, it's like, it's going to be on spotlight. Everything that I say possibly from this point, you know, is definitely going to be probably looked at under a fine tooth comb. And I was just like, yo, am I ready for this? Because mind you, I just came from a life of just being really just like low key, like, you know, not a lot of volatility in my life. You know, everything is simple. I actually wanted to create a YouTube channel just talking about tech. like
and I remember
MKBHD. I wanted to like create something, but like on a different perspective of why certain things in tech are important and why does it have a huge impact in the lives of everybody. And I just was like, you know, I was thinking about doing that a long time, but then I just like, even then I was just like, no, like this, I don't know if I could put that kind of time in. And then boom, EYL episode. And then my Instagram, people found me on Twitter. They found me on LinkedIn. They found me on Facebook. And it was just like, yo, how can I learn more about this? And mind you, I was already planning, like Jolene and I had like talked about like doing something on a smaller scale on Facebook, just to our friends. Like I just gotten comfortable with that. And I didn't even like the way I had to look at it was like, you know, the people wouldn't see me. Like, you know, I'm only just looking at the guys that I'm talking to on camera, which made it easier for me. But then it's like everything after that, like, you know, completely just like 0 to 100, as if I'm driving a roadster. And clearly I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready. But then I was like, you know, in my life, a lot of the things that I was placed into, I wasn't ready for. But I think that everything that I had done in my life, you know, leading up to this, you know, it was like the next thing where it's like, you know, my mind just said, you know what, if I can go through this, I can go through this, I can go through this. You know, I think if anything, I owe it to the people to be able to share the knowledge that I have. And I was like, but, you know, it's like, but what if they don't accept you? What if they don't like you? What if they start sending you hate mail and everything else? And I just had to tell myself, well, one day I'm going to have a child. So they will be able to, if YouTube is still in existence, and they will go back and watch, you know, what their father spoke about and learn.
When you showed up on EYL, the Come Up series didn't exist yet, right? Well, not the version that we see now.
Not the version of what you guys see now, no. But the version of, you know, there was a version of the Come Up series where we probably had about maybe 200 people, like, you know, within my friends group and Jolene's friends group that were probably showing up, or maybe even 50 people at one point in time. Like it was like hit or miss, where it was just like, you know, just sharing knowledge. And it's like, yo, it's like, you know, people are like starting to see like, okay, hey, I'm doing pretty well here. Like, yo, this is dope. And then it's like, you know, the EYL episode, and it's just like, all right, how am I going to make this work? And then boom, like, all right, Facebook started hating. Like our lives were like, our live streams just started acting up, and we were just like, all right, let's just bring it over to YouTube.
Yeah. And he became basically an overnight celebrity kind of within this space. I know you shake your head, but it's again,
you know me well enough to know that honestly, I hate being considered.
I know it's crazy because I don't see it that way, right? I don't see other adults as celebrities. I legitimately don't. So, and I started talking to you early on before, but your channel started growing even more. But now you have become some sort of celebrity within this space. And when you came onto YouTube and you were introducing options, and this is the part where I would say it was like a blessing and a curse. You showed up in 2020.
Yep.
It didn't matter what you got into at that time. Right. Everything went up. Yep. So
honestly, that's one of my biggest regrets in not showing up in 2018 or 2019.
Yeah, because it didn't matter. Everyone was like, yo, the Tacoma Series, Mark Monroe options, you're going to get 300, 400, 500%. And then Q1 happened in 2021.
And then it was a smack in the face to the culture.
Correct.
And to me.
Correct. Now, the funny thing, and I've mentioned this before on my channel, where I lost my walkaway money, right? Mm-hmm. Not once did I ever say, F Mark Monroe, here's the reason why I lost money. I never once looked at you as the reason why. You were a person who introduced options in my life. I listened to the things that you said, I studied, but I also significantly over-leveraged. A lot of people did. But I also know that once Q1 happened, and you mentioned this on your channel, you end up getting a lot of hate as well.
Oh yeah.
And like death threats and stuff like that. Correct?
That happened even before 2021.
Really?
Oh man. Man. Like ever since the day that I showed up on the stage, it started. Like ever since showing up on EYL on that EYL episode and then starting on YouTube, the hate started.
Oh, that's
like as like for me it was like, I got a lot of white supremacists, hate. I got a lot of other, bot type hate or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
But then it, like in 2021, the only thing that hurt so much about it was because of the fact that it was also people who look like me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like the one thing that I was afraid of ultimately came true.
Of you feeling like you disappointed some people.
Yep.
But that's also part of the process though when you're investing.
Oh, of course.
So it's kind of and the one thing too with you is you don't charge for any of this information. You were really big on that to begin with. And is there a reason why you were like, I'm not going to charge for this information? And I know the reason why I'm mentioning this because we all know it caused a rift within the community a little bit because people kind of saw you as, I don't know how to put this. They saw it in a way.
Just tell it to me. Tell it to me straight, Mark. Tell it to me straight.
People had a problem with the fact that you were releasing information because obviously options garner a bigger return if things hit properly, and people weren't interested in doing long-term or safer positions, and people felt that you were kind of cutting their legs off underneath them.
Yep.
And in the way that they're making money. And that was very sad to see because again, I started following everyone when everyone was kind of getting along. Everyone had their own little space where they fit in. You came on and it was awesome. And then things just kind of got sour.
I think it kind of got sour for me was more so in the sense of, I wasn't going to change. I wasn't going to change, to literally go from the freemium model to literally, doing this premium model or this course related, stuff. And it was like, I think that people started like the guys at EYL, I think they accepted that, not everybody within the camp probably would have accepted that, or like, the folks around would have accepted that. But I mean, yeah. And I think the thing that what I wanted people to understand though, is that, for me, I started looking at it like this, because of the fact that, the Come Up series is a free platform. Mm-hmm. That should be your baseline as it pertains to standard of information that comes through. Like now it's like, I wanted to look at it in the sense of this is a standard as if like, for example, this is our encyclopedia in which we can always come back to. Like, this is the information that always continues to keep growing and keeps building the knowledge base. Everything outside of that, that's to your discretion as it pertains to how is it that you would like to maneuver. But I did have a problem with the type of fees in which that, you know, that I was seeing that people were being charged, because I was like, yo, I look at it like this. When you look at it even on Wall Street, you know, to learn, you know, stock investing and everything else, you know, look at how much information that they give to you for free, but yet the platform itself is just like maybe $300. You know, to buy CNBC Pro, which can give you a ton of information, is $300. To buy bar chart for the year, what is it, like $300 or something like that, or $200? When you buy any of the things in which that, you know, even folks that don't look like us that have been able to utilize and to literally build up their knowledge base to become solid investors and traders, you know, they didn't have to pay exorbitant amounts of fees. And I looked at it in the sense that, you know, folks spend their hard-earned money to literally gain the knowledge, which I agree with. Like, you know, like there's certain things in which that, you know, hey, if you're paying for a person's time, it allows them to monetize and everything else for their time, because they got to make a living too. But when it gets to this point where it's a little bit too exorbitant, where it's like, and you can't always guarantee what they can return, you know, one, I have a problem with that. Two, the second part that I would look at and say, you know, where it really kind of rubs me the wrong way is the fact that, you know, I would look at it in the sense that, you know, we are not free as a people. Like, as a culture, we are not free. And, you know, there's so many times where we have folks that have monetized off of the culture, and then yet people that they have monetized off of are still at ground zero. And to me, I really strongly have an issue with that. And so if anything, I said, okay, hey, what we will become for the come up series, because, you know, on the background, you see that in some cases that some folks, you know, it is a very much so money grab for them. It is very clear and obvious that it's a money grab, and it's just a way for them to literally, you know, live their best lives and everything else.
But it's not. See, that's the thing. It's to a lot of us, it didn't seem like a money grab, right? And I still think to a lot of people, it still doesn't seem like a money grab. Because that's fair. Because as you know, I'm very outspoken about. I don't like. For sure. I don't like when people take advantage of other people. But at the same time, I don't knock anyone's hustle. I don't knock anyone selling courses. I have a mentorship in OCB Club. I pay for my mentor, but I think it's worth it for what you get. Once I started my channel and started going from groups to groups and getting exposed to everything else is when I started seeing the intention.
But should a person spend $40,000 just to learn the stock market?
No. That's what I'm saying. I started seeing the person's purpose. And the purpose isn't always what they say the purpose is. Right. And I never had a problem with you doing anything free. Obviously, one of the perks. I mean, because like one of the perks, like I did a whole video on it, but one of the perks of paying someone should be that you have access to that person. Obviously, not everyone has access to you. You do stuff free. You decide what you want to do, when you want to do it, and it's for people to get that knowledge and absorb the information that you're putting out there. And I respect you a lot for that, because I did see the hate that you got through that. I definitely saw the hate once Q1 happened and people's portfolios kind of looked shitty. And you still decided to get up and continue to do what you're doing
the tough part about that was I also had to deal with my own portfolio. Like,
but people don't know about
tough times.
Correct.
Like, that's the thing. Nobody knows about that part. Like, they just know of only just like like you're this person that like produces content and you give all this knowledge, you give all these gems and everything else. I mean, you know, but then at the same token, they don't realize that, okay, hey, that I'm an investor too. I'm a trader too. I'm a husband too. I'm a person too. Mm-hmm. I'm more than just a person that you see that just shares information and knowledge or whatever it is that you consider it on YouTube. or on Twitter Spaces or on IG. You know, I am genuinely, you know, a person that like literally like aims to truly help. When I normally read a lot of the messages and I get it, like I see that there's a consensus, and a lot of times from the consensus of what I gather from people that want to learn specific things, that's ultimately what I will teach.
Okay, so that's how you decide what you're gonna put out there.
Yeah, I really let the people decide what is it that they would want to learn as a general consensus, and I take the general consensus of people of like seeing the messages over and over, though that I may not respond to every single one of them, but it's just the fact that, you know, okay, hey, I'm seeing on a general level a trend here of what is it that people want to know about the markets, or which led me into the economic side of things. A lot of folks wanted to know the economics behind like how things go even beyond, say, for example, just the stock market that we see every day. And therein, that's ultimately how I was like, okay, hey, you guys want to learn this? I'll teach it.
Did you, through your process, ever at once think about potentially charging for anything?
No.
It was always, I'm going to
No, we told, Jolene and I had always agreed from day one that ultimately it was going to be free. I mean, to the people. We said, if anything, if we do ever charge anything, it will be to the companies that want to utilize our platform to share a message with anything, we would charge them. Gotcha. But we would never put that cost. We never believed on charging of people that aren't free to literally pay with the hard-earned dollars that they earn, instead of paying it to us, because we're traders on our own. Like, if we can't be traders on our own and literally like live off of what is it that we do based upon what is it that we teach, then how good really are we? That's ultimately how we started since day one.
Yeah. And to be clear, and I wanted people to understand this, you don't have a problem with people charging.
No.
Okay.
I don't. The only thing I have a problem with is when I see that folks are being taken advantage of. Okay. That's different.
Yes. Okay. That way, it's
like
fine out there.
Like
it's
that'd be like me like saying I have a problem with you paying college tuition to go to Harvard or something like that. Though that I believe that you know those fees are a little bit exorbitant, but still, it's like you pay also for an experience. Like I paid for an experience along with the knowledge that I received at Tuskegee University to attend or matriculate at a historically Black college university. I paid for that. So I'm not going to sit there and say that I believe in not paying for an education if I myself paid for an education. But the problem, but the thing is like, if I'm paying for this education, you know, I'm looking at it like this. If I'm paying for this economics class in which that you know, my econ professor, you better have studied economics. And you better know economics like the back of your hand. If I studied, say, for example, you know, civil engineering, then you better be a person that is either a part of the ASCE, American Society of Civil Engineers, or have achieved your professional engineer's license and also studied civil engineering, because that's ultimately what I'm paying for. You know, for me, I look at it sometimes where it's like the part where it's like I sometimes kind of question, but it's like it's not too big of a question, where it's like the stuff that we pay for, we're paying for an experience, whatever that experience is. But then the question is that in what we're paying for, you know, is there any, like, what happens, like, or is it just buyer beware? You know, at what part do we say that, okay, hey, that have I received? What is it that I'm supposed to be paying for? And what happens if I don't receive that? Like, there have been many times where it's just like, yo, I felt bad because there are, like, I found out that there was an array of other options courses that are out there that people are teaching from. And yet the Come Up series came about, and yet, you know, all right, well, the Come Up series taught me more than what I learned in this options course. How is that possible?
Yeah.
Like, that's the part where it's like, it really makes you frustrated, because you're like, okay, hey, well, if I spent all this money towards something that now I believe that I've learned more, and of course it's all subjective, that I learned more from this, then is there something that says that I can receive my funds back because of the fact that I wasn't satisfied with the product or the service?
No, that's not how it works. It's all buyers beware.
And that to me is like, I think that like for me is like, I wanted to challenge the fact of like the transparency in the sense of like, well, what is it that people pay for, and can you actually guarantee that this is what they, that they should be receiving? Can you make those things very clear from the jump that this is what they receive, that this is what they're paying for? Like, for example, if I buy a Tesla, and if I'm paying for Tesla's services alongside with a Tesla car, I know what I'm paying for and I know what to expect. If I pay for, say, for example, somebody to clean my house or to be a chef and cater food for me, I know what I'm paying for. And ultimately, if that service is not met, then ultimately we have a problem that needs to be reconciled. But if there's not that process in which that we have, and especially within our community, that creates a challenge, because then we start to think about the transparency part, and then we send more people away versus the people that should be here, and the fact that essentially that we're taking the opportunity away from them.
Very true. Very true. So that's out there now.
That's out there. So if you teach a course, hey, have at it. Just make sure that essentially that it's like, just be very clear of what is it that people are getting. And
actually follow through on
yes
on what you're saying you're going to do. That's my huge thing.
It's just that simple. Like, for me, like, I'm not for me, it's like I'm not trying to pick a fight with anybody. It's not about that. When we look at the other folks in Wall Street and everything else within the financial landscape, these folks are not like, treating each other like they rep different sets or anything like that. This is Wall Street.
Yeah, and it's all the same information. It's all the same information that's been there since the time that I was reading it in newspapers, and people now have it online, and now they have apps for it, and then pretty soon they have it on like they're getting information on TikTok. I mean, it's like you have all this information that is out there that's been out there since day one, and now it's like sometimes where I sit back and say it's like, well, it's like we shouldn't place, Is it right to place a toll booth on that type of information that has always been there? Yes, and I'm in the mindset too. If you have information that you gain for free or that's readily available for free, I do think time should be valued, obviously.
Yeah.
But if you have an opportunity to help someone, you should do it at a reasonable. If you're going to charge, just do it at a reasonable price. That's my only philosophy behind it. And obviously, if you're wealthy enough, do it for fucking free.
My God, see? Exactly.
Especially because there's nothing, everything's out there. And it's like I told everyone before, eventually I may do like a beginner's course for investors, but all you pay for is me putting all the videos together because I'm just remixing stuff that's already free on YouTube or in books or the library.
That's time, man hours, and edits and everything else. That's stuff like equipment that you have to buy. Like, for example, when people look at it, I mean, let's put this into perspective, shall we? That camera right there is a Netflix camera. We literally shot feature films on that camera. On that camera, use that equipment up there, and then the one next to the cash flow game. Like, a lot of this stuff that we use is like literally for full featured content.
Mm-hmm.
We bring this here because of the fact that we find it cool to make financial literacy look cool, and on top of that, entertaining. And that's our way of how we do it. But I mean, honestly, it's like, if you think about it, it's like we don't need to charge the people to do that, because honestly, if we want to keep it a buck, the profits from our own trades, ultimately pay
for all that. Yeah, yeah, that is 100% true. Now, when it comes to your losses, because first of all, I do want to. So people, you kind of got popular off of the Tesla loss, right? Yeah, how did it even come out? Who put that out there? Was that a conversation you had on another channel or an article? Like, where did people hear that you took this massive loss?
Well, are we talking about the first loss, or are we talking about last year's loss?
I'm talking about the first loss, the one where because in 2020 you came to the scene and everyone was like,
so the first loss wasn't Tesla. Just for the record, that was not Tesla. That was Apple.
It was Apple. Okay.
Tesla was in 2021 alongside with ARK. Those were the two of my most major losses that literally set me back. Like if you multiply that times, hold on, let's pull up a calculator.
It's gonna be depressing because I complain about my losses and
so 11 times the value of the loss that I took in 2018.
Oh.
Fuck you! Fuck!
Yeah, you gotta show up and come upstairs and have some tears and cry a little bit more.
No, but see, the thing is, like, here's the thing. If you go back and watch some of those episodes of the Come Up series, all the while that I was receiving that hate from other individuals, I was taking those losses on my own and just sitting there and like literally having to just like eat nothing but humble pie and just sit there and just like, all right, I'll sit in the doghouse for now. I'll sit here and I have to put on this straight face for everybody. Though that all the things that I've like received via messages and everything else, I have to carry all of that.
Yeah.
After the Clubhouse conversation, one of those last Clubhouse conversations, I was like, look, people don't understand the backstory of what is it that I had to go through in order to do so. Now, it's like, if we really want to get to it in the sense of like, and it was kind of funny because I had a joke with Q. I was like, yo, let's get to this point where it's like, okay, if we really want to keep it fully a buck and fully transparent, then everybody show their 1099s.
Yeah.
Then we're having a different conversation.
Yeah, things get silent when that comes out, when you ask for that. So,
but I mean, again, it was that. So the loss that I took was primarily because I was very big in the short side for Tesla and also in the leverage for ARK. But at the same token, I still had long-term positions that I was highly convicted in that I stuck with.
Yes, like AMD.
Yeah. AMD, XOY, and a few others.
And it's okay. But the first loss, whatever, the infamous one, the infamous Apple one. But who put that out there? Was it you? Did you talk about that, or
I talked about it. About it. Like for me, it's like the way that I always wanted to be is I always wanted to be true to the game by just being honest and not being the type of person that flaunts his winnings. If you notice, I don't really talk about my wins.
You don't?
I don't talk about them actually at all. I don't talk about them. I think I only mentioned it once, and that was in a posting because that was like a lifelong goal for me. So that was like the culmination of my time as a trader from 2004 all the way up to 2021.
Mm-hmm.
I had finally reached that plateaued goal. But then it was just like, okay, outside of that, I don't really talk about that because honestly, I don't think that those things matter. There's more lessons in an L than there is in a W.
I agree. And that's actually why I always post my losses. I mean, honestly, most people look at me, they're like, man, this guy really sucks at everything he does. Because that's all I really post. I'm like, yo, because the reality is because I know how it feels sometimes when during Q1, before I start my channel, just seeing everyone win, it messed with me a little bit because I'm like, man, what did I do wrong? And it also psyched me out to the point where I got out of positions where I probably should have held because I gave up on AMD. I'm gonna be real with you. I gave up on AMD.
You told me about it. I wish you. I was like, yo, I wish you would have called me or something like that, or like you could have had a powwow because I was like, bro.
But having such a huge loss,
with
the Apple, and then having a huge loss in 2021, how do you even continue to put your money in the market and continue to get up and still push forward?
Well, I mean, after you get over the loss part, I mean, essentially those things happen. Being a trader, and if you're going to be a successful one, at it, you're going to have to understand that with the success also, you're going to have to deal with the losses that are also there.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was just like, I a lot of folks don't realize this, but like, people only know the story of the $4,500 loss in college, and they only know the $18 million loss in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
But what they don't know is the losses that took place along the pathway, where it was just like, it was $250,000 here, $500,000 here, as a loss. And it was just like, okay, hey, it happened. I can't roll back the clock. I can't turn back the clock. Being a trader is like being an entrepreneur. There's things in which that you're going to be able to control, and then there's going to be things in which that you can't control. If you focus on the things in which that you can't control, you'll have a little impact, and you'll just never be successful. And that's how I've always looked at it. Like, you know, my life is like, if you look at my life, it's always speaks of a story of opportunity, resilience, and then on top of that, you know, some downward moments where my life has been placed in correction. But, you know, for the most part, it's like every time that I come out of those situations, I'm always better and better and better. So for me, it's like, you know, coming out of it, it's like, you know, a loss doesn't make me who I am. The loss only tells me, you know, shows me that there's even more growth in which that I can make, and that I can continue to keep going and become even better. Like, you know, that's really where it comes down to. Like, you know, stomach. Now, don't get me wrong. The day that I took the loss, like, it was, you know, it was like as if I lost someone.
Yeah,
like,
it's a lot of money.
My wife was like, what was going on? And it's like, you know, the part for me is like, you know, coming from the entrepreneurial world, where it's like things fall apart all the time. Things, you know, run off the rails all the time. And I look at it like, you know, being an entrepreneur is like being a parent, like having a kid. They never go how you know, I'm not a parent, but I can assume that they never always go according to how you had it planned. They fall apart.
Always.
And it's like, you know, it just always does. But yet at the same token, you know that like, okay, hey, sooner or later, like after you get through the situation, you'll know that you'll be okay. Like you just gotta have that belief in yourself that essentially that, yo, I've taken this loss, you know, what is it that I can learn from this? How is it that I can grow from this so that way I can be better for the next time? And ultimately focus on being better for the next go round. You know, for me, like the biggest thing that I learned this year was I literally fell to Bill Ackman's BS again.
Mm-hmm. Please.
I fell for it again. Huh?
Please explain so people.
So Bill Ackman in 2020 literally brought all this panic and fear in the stock market, which literally caused the market, alongside with other factors, but he literally didn't help. He threw gasoline on what was coming on and was like, yo, here's the blowtorch to add to it with the canister. I'll just turn on the blowtorch and toss it with the can in there.
This was out a few days ago. It's killing young people. It's killing healthy people.
Say Hilton is going to zero. I mean,
again, I'm a major shareholder. What I'm saying is, if we allow this to continue the way we allow it to continue, okay, every hotel company in the world, okay, is done. You order in Chipotle, and you stay there for a month, and you spend time with your loved ones, okay, and the virus will die. What will happen is, you know, the hotel industry and the restaurant industry will go bankrupt first. Boeing is, you know, on the brink. Okay, Boeing will not survive without a government bailout. Okay, so look at airline industry, auto industry, restaurant industry, hotel industry. You know, we got to do the 30-day shutdown. And if the president has to bring out the National Guard to keep people in their homes, which I don't think he will need to do, he should do it.
And the market, like while the markets were open,
yeah,
you literally started seeing the market like literally just like, okay, Bill, sell everything.
Yeah.
And it was just like, lo and behold, when he came on, he was shorting he had
shorting the market.
Short on the market.
Yep.
And literally he's making money as the market is going down the entire time. And then ultimately when the market recoups, it comes out that he had this brilliant short right before he came on. And that left a sour taste even with the folks at CNBC because of the fact that he used their platform to do it.
Mm-hmm. It was 26, right? It was 26 million that went to 2 billion or something like that, right?
Correct.
Yep.
And then he did it again this year where he's talking. Nobody was talking about the Fed raising rates at 50 basis points until Bill Ackman showed up.
And you fell for it.
And I fell for it. I fell for it. But this time I didn't fall for it as much as I thought I was. Like, you know, this time it's like I stayed within my positions with the conviction that, you know, okay, hey, though in some other positions I did cut. Like I was like, you know, I'm going to cut them because this could be massive. But then I was like, later on, I was just like, oh man, but where's the data behind this? Why aren't we hearing anything else from anybody else that's like saying that we could be seeing this? This is all being fed from one specific place where it started in its genesis. And then come to find out, he was shorting again
Doing the same thing.
And then after he finished shorting, when Netflix dropped, he bought up over 3.3 million shares of Netflix and then became a massive holder in Netflix, saying that, found this as an opportune time to buy. So he took the profits from his shorts to literally
buy
produce
Netflix.
a big stake in Netflix.
That's why Netflix ended up jumping up these past.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. Because I saw that and I was like, I don't.
When you buy up over 3.3 million shares as one person, yeah, clearly.
Wow. So you have I would say for the most part, you kind of have a bullish sentiment when it comes to the market, right? Are you agnostic when it comes to bear, bull, or are you more?
I'm agnostic.
Okay.
For me, it's like when my BS meter starts flagging, then I become a bear. When the data just doesn't support the thesis in the short term, I become a bear. When you look at it overall across normally over the time period, you typically see that the market is ultimately bullish, and we have short-term periods of bearish activity. And for me, it's I guess that would make me a long-term bull, because if you look at over the track history record, alongside with the markets, I've been pretty much, bullish. You don't really see me with long-term, shorts against, really the market. You're not going to see me in a 2-year short against the S&P 500.
So moving forward, though, especially with the January correction where everything's been correcting, I know in December, I believe you were talking about how you believe that the S&P or the SPY is going to go above 5. And you still at that time had somewhat of a bullish sentiment. Is your thesis still the same, or do you feel like it could potentially you still are okay?
Well, because look at it like this: it's we were expecting to have a correction in February. We were expecting to have a February correction, March correction. Instead of having it in February, March, we had it in January. The whole correction took place in 1 month.
And during this time, while this is happening, do you place puts against your positions, or do you just kind of?
Yeah. So normally when we come as we go into earnings season, and especially if I'm doing something on a long term, especially during that time period, because things can get volatile, to protect myself from any potential downside risk, it's when I walk into that quarter that I know that we can see some weakness, I typically get in around the time before essentially we start to see, any bearish activity. So
you do hedge?
Oh yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Because that's a whole nother skill. I'm not very good at it. I'm actually terrible at it.
I'll tell you this. It took me years to get there. So, I don't want that to be for anybody to say, okay, hey, you could just do it within a short period of time. It took me probably a solid 7 years to even get hedging correct, or to even have the full breadth and understanding of the concept. So for me, it's just now that I'm doing a lot of long-term plays, and that I've been in the market and I understand where we are in cycles and everything else, it becomes a little bit easier. But again, it's never really because I could be in 2019, right? I can hedge against something, but yet 2019 was probably one of the greatest runs in the stock market, and my hedges got smoked.
But it didn't really matter, because you still your call positions obviously.
My call positions ultimately outshine my hedges. So, and that's the thing. It's when you think about it, when you look at allocation and everything else, and also how you position yourself, one position should never define a portfolio. One position should never define a portfolio. Hell, even 2 positions should never define a portfolio.
With that being said, do you think it's smart for, again, you're like the options guy, right? Do you think, I mean, you are, yes, that's what you're mostly known for. Do you think it's smart for people just to have options in their portfolio?
No, not at all. I think that honestly, you should have a delicate balance. If anything, there's nothing wrong with holding stock. There's nothing wrong with holding, mutual funds or anything like that. There's nothing wrong with holding dividend, positions within your portfolio. you know, because when those options are going through their rough patches of time, you're still going to have something that ultimately, like, the meter is still running on something else to, you know, to really carry you over and hold you through.
Okay, because I think
so having diversification within your portfolio, and I've always said this, like, you know, 80% of my portfolio is options, but 20% is also, like, has been sitting there in stock since forever.
Correct. And I think people should also understand that just because you have 80% doesn't mean they should have
doesn't
80%.
mean that essentially doesn't mean that everybody else should. Like, that's what works for me because of also the other things that I also have going in my, like, that are cooking in the pot. Like, for example, you know, there's startups that I've invested into, you know, essentially there's a, like, it doesn't take for me to be a home run hitter in every single one of the startups. Like, if I invested in, let's say on an average, if I invested in 10 startups and 9 of those startups failed, but one of those startups was successful, then I'm okay.
Because that one usually outdoes
it normally significantly outdoes, you know, essentially, you know, what those other ones, which you would have spent in the beginning anyways.
Okay. No, I have one more thing before I forget, because you and I don't agree on this one, and you talk crap about this company quite a bit.
Hopefully it's not Intel.
Yes, it is Intel. It is Intel.
Oh, Lord.
So I was put on through Intel through our mutual friend who schooled me a little bit on it, was like, take a look at it. I looked at it and I liked it.
Who's our mutual friend so that way I can send them a message like, who?
Q.
Oh, Lord.
And I looked at
Q and I will have arguments and debates on, like, we can debate sports and that's fine.
Yeah.
It's a fight to the death when Q and I are debating stock.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I totally get it. But that's good too, because you have someone who's also challenging you.
Who's challenging me.
But I have my own little group of my friends. It's like 20 of us or whatever, and I talk to them and stuff. And I was telling them, like, after Q had mentioned, I was like, Intel, why would I even touch Intel? Then I started looking into it, and then I started the business and seeing what they were doing and how they're revamping stuff. And then I started having a strong conviction, and I started buying shares. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't trust it on the option spectrum. I will not touch it. I will not get no leaks. I will none of that stuff. I will just simply buy shares. But they've been having a lot of good news has been coming out.
Good. Is it marketing?
See, here you go. Here now, but
hey,
I just want to see where your stance is with this. If you still think it's a piece of crap company, obviously this is the thing. I don't think it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be.
Now that they replace their CEO, I think that now that they replace their CEO, they're a different company, and they're working really hard to be a different company because of the fact that they now have engineering in the company.
Mm-hmm.
So I still think that, like, you know, I don't think that, you know, Intel is a POS company anymore now that they actually brought some real brain power to the leadership role. I will say that. My still gripe that I have with Intel, though, is really, like, I look at things now from not only from a stock investor standpoint, but I look at it purely how we look at it from a VC standpoint, where you got to look at it from the perspective of where's the growth, you know, where is the opportunity, where's the scale, where is the, you know, of course we talk about vertical integration and everything else, but also, like, the idea that, okay, hey, if we look at it over the next 10 years, like, for example, when our children are coming of age, right?
Mm-hmm.
What does the company Intel look like for them?
It will be most likely on the lower tier budget end of all systems, is my theory on how I'm looking forward to it. It's similar to, like, phones. I don't know if you're a huge tech head when it comes to phones, but it's kind of like OnePlus. Do you remember? I mean, yeah, duh. Yeah, but like the OnePlus. But you have an Apple, you know, aren't you like an Apple guy? Oh, okay. You do have a OnePlus. Ooh, foot in my mouth. Okay. So, but it's kind of like the OnePlus. You remember when the OnePlus came out? No one was really talking about it. But
nobody was talking about it.
But it did it.
But it had a lot behind it.
It did, and it did stuff really well for a real low price. And that's where I see Intel moving forward. I don't think it's going to be an AMD. I don't think it's going to be NVIDIA. But I think we'll still have its own space when it comes to the budget systems.
I believe that that's true. I think I look at it in the sense of like, I still believe that there will be a space for Intel. Like, I believe so. But when I'm looking at it, I'm looking at how the industry itself is changing. Like Intel has always had a foundry underneath its belt since really like, forever.
Mm-hmm.
And then now all of a sudden you're trying to build foundries, but technically by that time it's kind of like, okay, hey, you're trying to get ahead of the fact of that we have this huge amount of demand that's coming through. But then I'm on the firm belief that what's going to happen, because are they a little too late? Because by the time when the demand starts to settle, then you start to have an over amount of supply. And then the question is, do you become like the TSM, the American version of TSM? That I could see that as a strong possibility. But then what does TSM look like 10 years from now, given that they've been here and they've been rocking the stage?
Mm-hmm.
What does NVIDIA look like? What does AMD look like? What do each and every single one of these chip companies look like? What is their identity? And if we're the only say that we're going to talk about low budget, I could see that, but, cybernetics is coming, robotics is coming, all those things, like pretty much sentient beings are coming. Why is Intel not on the forefront of that? Because why? If you're not putting your money towards artificial intelligence and everything else where they should have done, it's like they've already missed the boat on the chip side of things. They may as well use their chip technology to start using it on, say, for example, the next frontier, which is the place where we're starting to compete and really what's going to dictate exactly who is the winner. It's a winner-take-all game right now, and that's artificial intelligence. Ultimately, pretty soon, move into the next frontier, which is, if you flip the two letters, it's intelligent assistance, where the artificial intelligence becomes so good that we don't even see it as robotics anymore. We look at it as like the second population.
I agree with you on a certain aspect. I think the artificial intelligence, especially that last statement you made, where it's basically like another human being.
Skynet.
Skynet. I think we're still maybe 20 to 30 years down the line for systems to get like that. I could be wrong.
You gotta be sick. Maybe that's on me. Like, and that lets me know that I accept that challenge, because I gotta show you all more. Like, this is what's here now, and this is how far along we're coming. Like, if you look at the VC deals that are taking place,
mm-hmm.
You got to look at the companies that are like, well within their rounds. Look at CES. Robot stood on its own, left unattended to have pure conversation, limited conversation, of course,
mm-hmm.
but pure conversation with facial expression now with human beings.
And it was very creepy, and I want to kill it.
It is very creepy, but at the same token, but look at it like this. It started off with them doing those same type of things to help kids that were dealing with autism.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's ultimately how they brought it about. But we're very much so, moving forward. When you look at robotic arms, when you look at limbs and everything else, those things are coming within a small subset of years. When you look at, everybody's looking at things like FSD as like, this is about to be the next latest and greatest thing. But there's so much AI that's already out there that's learned so much that, like, just putting it into a body and giving it the mechanics as it pertains to human movements, or even in other arenas, we're there. Westworld is like, the world that we know from Westworld is almost here.
And that's scary.
It
Love
is.
That show, by the way, it's a great show. If you guys
it's a great show. It's a very great show, but it shows you, like, think about it like this. Normally when you start seeing shows like that do that type of content, they had to learn it from someplace.
Black Mirror.
Had to do the research.
Black Mirror is
and look at like Black Mirror is a prime good example. That show came out in 2012?
No, I don't think it was that long ago. It was no, I think you're right. The first season did, and they got canceled, and then Netflix ended up picking it up.
Right.
Yes.
But think about like that. Think about like that those episodes where they were entertaining. They were doing like events in front of just a bunch of screens.
Yeah, that happened.
That COVID happened.
Yeah.
I remember watching WWE and seeing nothing but people through Microsoft.
Yes. Yeah, I do.
So again, it's like, we're at that point where it's like, if you did not make the investment, it's great that you're trying to make the investment now. And for all we know, the market will always produce another opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
But if you did not make the investment early on the way that you should have, then honestly, it's like you missed it. You
could, I would, and I agree with you on that. They probably will miss the opportunity of being the leader in that space. And
Nvidia's taking that.
They're taking that, exactly. But like I said, I still think that Intel could.
They'll be third. They'll be third.
They'll be third, and it might be like for the kids' toys, the artificial intelligence kids' toys, and they have Intel chips in there, and there will still be a space, and they will still be able to make sales, and I still think they will be profitable. I don't think they're going to be some huge, ginormous company. They dropped the ball on that. No, it is what it is. No. But I still think the stock can go to $70 in 2 to 3 years.
Oh, I think that the stock could be at $100. I mean, if we're, being honest, I think that in the next 3 years, we'll probably see Intel probably at $100 a share. So I'm not worried about Intel, like getting it as it pertains to like, a share price. The thing that really worries me is, okay, here's a good tell. If Intel cannot find itself in more vehicles now that it's being replaced by Tesla, then Intel's in trouble. If Intel has to make Mobileye go public, and if Mobileye fails as a publicly traded company, Intel's in trouble. Those are two dominant, like major points right there, which we're saying that, okay, hey, like high performance computing, server chips, and everything else, that market's going to be what it's going to be. If you can't place yourself in artificial intelligence systems, as well as the things in which that really require artificial intelligence, and just to get your foot in the door, which is an automotive, an industrial automotive, and if Mobileye, which we haven't really heard of, like, making any significant inroads behind GM Cruise, NVIDIA Drive, and of course Tesla FSD, if it can't find itself there, then there's going to be some trouble. There's going to be some trouble, because that, you have to think about it, like placing yourself, like that's a new vertical market that has now been created. And Intel should definitely capitalize in those markets. Like if we look at what we see today, like, phones, tablets, Oculus, that's over. Like, forget about those things. We need to be like, Intel needs to be on the forefront of thinking about the next thing. And if they, like I said, automotive is one of those things, which ultimately prepares the stage for everything else.
And hopefully
they can't miss that boat. They cannot miss that boat. They're not. And so I will give it I'll give it my re-rating. I will give my re-rating from my re-rating from sell. I'll remove my sell rating from Intel, and I'll say for right now, I'll say market perform.
There we go.
I'll place Intel at market perform. So which means I'm neutral on the stock, I'm neutral on the company. I'm more in a wait and see approach to see what is it that they can do, because they're spending up. They have a huge capex spending. I'd like to see ultimately what doors open up for Intel to make me go overweight on the stock.
There you go. That's all I wanted to hear.
Because look at that. See,
hitting them hard.
I can compromise. And I will say, like, sitting at 52-week lows right now for Intel. Huge opportunity, opportunity. But again, cautious opportunity in the sense that let them confirm some things. Let them show you some things.
Before you go all in. Yeah, I've been scaling.
And Pat, their CEO, Pat, he's doing a phenomenal job of turning things around, where people are starting to not only talk about Intel, but people are starting to get excited because we want to see, competition. Competition ultimately spurs the innovation. You're gonna get that between AMD and NVIDIA. You're automatically gonna have
Yeah,
that
it's already there.
They're on a collision course to literally like, we don't know what the precipice is gonna look like, but something's coming. Just like we know that there's a precipice coming between TSM and Samsung. Something's gonna have to give there. And could Intel be a person that steps into that space? We don't know. It's always a challenge with American companies because their margin, their cost basis is always higher.
Yeah, that is 100% true. So, well, Mark, thank you so much for sitting down, bro. I really do appreciate it.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I'm getting old. I'm almost 50. One more year, I'll be 40. I got the gray hairs in my beard. It is what it is, though. But
you know, the way that you do it is shave.
Yeah, my wife likes the beard.
Luckily, I have no gray hair yet. So, you know, honestly, I'm just going to. And it's funny, if you look at me from like 2010, 2011, and everything else, it's so crazy. I look exactly the same. So my goal is see how long I can look the same before it all starts to go down.
Start changing. Yeah. No, I definitely look younger when I shave my beard, but my wife likes it, so it is what it is. But Mark,
hey,
thank you so much. I appreciate
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are watching Trading with a Dummy or listening to Trading with a Dummy if you got the YouTube premium subscription. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.